Good evening. We are all set for the live broadcast of today's Parks, Public Works, Recreation, and Environment Committee meeting on HPA-TV and Frontier Government Channels 96 and 6032. It will also be streamed via hptv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, HPA-TV's Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV apps. It will also be rebroadcast and made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So tonight is Wednesday, May 10th. As I said, it's the Parks, Public Works, Recreation, and the Environment Committee. With me, I have, I am the chair, Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti. I have Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon. I have Councilman Lick LeBron, and I have Councilman John Gale, all voting members. I will call the meeting to order. We have the first agenda item, which I think Councilman Clark, Majority Leader Clark, was going to come on, but I think Councilwoman Surgeon is prepared. It's the resolution urging Hartford to track the costs of climate change. And I know we have Cecilia Drayton, who is here from the Office of Sustainability, and she will have a presentation.
Thank you, everyone. I had trouble finding the mute button. All right, we'll get started. Thank you all for having us. We have a presentation for you today about climate change in Hartford. For discussion will be Hartford's Climate Action Plan, as we thought it would be a good thing to review what we have and what we have going on. There are also some specific questions that Councilman Clark had asked us to answer. I'll be answering those in items 1 and 2 on the agenda. After that, we have the public health impacts of climate change, climate expenditures in the proposed budget, stormwater and localized flooding information, and planned actions by MDC, ongoing levee system work, and then we'll be available to answer questions. So I guess I will start here. Can everyone see my screen? All good?
Yep.
With the overall design of our climate action plan. So here we have, it was designed with a purpose, and that was just to improve resiliency and overall stewardship in Hartford. And then the underlying values of the climate action plan are public health, economic development, and social equity. And those values influence the 6 action areas that are below that. We have energy, we have food, we have landscape, transportation, waste, and water. And within each action area are at least 5 goals. Resiliency is a component that's built into every action area. And then there are strategy items that help us achieve those goals. Altogether, we have 133 strategy items within the 6 action areas of the climate action plan, and each of them are in various stages of progress, which I'll review in the next slides. So here, I just want to give a brief overview. Our climate action plan is on our website, and energy, and I just wanted to call out some caveats that have been accomplished in the past. So for energy, we did replace the LED streetlights with LED lights. For food, we did ensure that farmers markets did accept SNAP benefits, and they do. And for parks, and these are just a few. These aren't total everything what we've done in every action area, but just for the interest of time, I just picked a few. So no-mo areas in public parks was something from the landscape section. Complete the streets was within our transportation section. That is an actual policy. We banned the lightweight single-use plastic bags. And then we incorporated green infrastructure into MDC's long-term control plan. So those are just a few that I wanted to highlight here. I do know that there's a lot of information on the screen on the left, but as you can see, after the action item section, they're in the middle there, the middle column here are all of the goals that are in progress. Before I got to that, so I wanted to just give an overall update. So we are about a quarter a quarter not started for all of the goals on the climate action plan for certain goals. And then we're about 50% in progress and then a quarter complete. So the majority of our action areas are in progress at the moment. And I just wanted to point that out. So it's a quarter not started, 50% in motion, and then a quarter complete. So I know Councilman Clark had some specific questions. One question was, he wanted to know the solar installations taking place in the city. So we have two types. We have virtual net metering, which is a site that is not located near the city, but we do get the benefits of that array. And then we have actual solar panels. And then here on the facility location, I have listed Goodwin Library, Hartford Public High School, Mary Hooker School, and our CAPS landfill. And then the associated metrics that they do produce here on the right in the metrics column. And then for the virtual net metering, I just wanted to let everyone know the net value that each of those sites brought in. So those are the metrics, depending on when they began. Some are Q1 of different years, but that is the overall synopsis. And then and I thought I'd give you guys just a little taste of what is actually happening. We are looking to do a second solar landfill array. And then we are looking to put some solar arrays on Weaver High School as well. And here are some metrics associated with the solar landfill array here. And then on the next slide, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what the panels would look like on the high school. So there are a number of them there, and that's what they would look like. The next question that Councilman Clark had was, how are residents being informed of or hearing about climate issues and initiatives? So I just wanted to highlight just a few that have gone on in the past and some that are reoccurring this year. So as you know, in December, we found out about the energy supply rate increase for all of our residents who had electric supply. So we kind of had to pivot. And for our energy equity challenge, we relaunched that, and that included our community partnership initiative with Eversource, and then our Solar for All program to bring down those energy bills. So for the energy equity challenge, we do canvassing and door knocking. We partner with our piece of the pie, and we do events, and then certain neighborhoods that we think that could benefit from this initiative here. Event tabling, as I said, and then physical collateral like postcards. We do informational mailers, and sometimes we do the trifold brochures, and then social media. For the Solar for All, which I did list the flyer on the right, as you can see, we have partnered with the Hartford Public Library, and we are doing tabling events. We're in the process of designing a workshop that then we will do outreach for to make our residents aware that this will be occurring. That's happening in the future. We went to Blue Hills Civic Association has a monthly event where they invite parents, and they have childcare, and they serve dinner. And Posigen, our Solar for All vendor, was there, and they did table that event. And then other community organizations such as the Free Center, which is housed in a former library, we do utilize, and then we will tap into those NRZ meetings. But I just wanted to show the diversification of our approach. When we did Retain the Rain, we partnered with multiple community partners in the city, we did have Key Park Sustainability distribute the rain barrels, and there were separate outreach and education avenues during that initiative as well. So that's just kind of like the in-person or physical tangible media. We did diversify our approach this year, and we launched Climate Bites, which kind of connects residents to how climate impacts Hartford. And we talk about everything from recycling, or just initiatives that we feel like, or things that we feel like the residents should know about. We're also looking to target that younger demographic that is just so active on social media. So we decided that this was something that would help us do that. So we have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have Twitter. We also have our own website, and then we were going to incorporate this into some of the newsletters that we were going to put out throughout the year. Another initiative would be the Sustainability Spotlight. So we would love to highlight the sustainability heroes within our city. This example is just Levo. They were having establishing a CSA where they would have local hydroponic growers actually kind of create a business, if you will. And they had 73, and they had partnered with a number of churches, and they produced 4,000 pounds of produce. And we just wanted to highlight that they were taking or calling for residents who wanted to participate in that CSA through the spring. So we helped them get the word out. And then we just asked the residents, if you know of anyone or know of any business that you would like to see highlighted here, we were open to do that and feature them as well. So those are just two of our social media campaigns. The next question he had asked, Councilman Clark, he wanted to know what climate policies we have implemented in Hartford, and how might we be able to take it beyond to other municipalities in Hartford, in Connecticut. So here I just separated the current policies that we did implement since the climate action plan's inception, and then the ones that are in progress. I do know that we have had a large flooding issue, and we really feel passionate about incorporating some form of green infrastructure feasibility into our capital improvements projects. It probably shouldn't be an afterthought. It definitely needs to be a part of the planning process. So that's something that Paul Drummy and formerly Nat Gale and I were working on. So that's still in progress. And there are a few zoning codes and that were implemented. And I know that we are due for another probably brainstorming about reassessing our climate action plan, and assessing policy will be in that process as well. The next question was, what sorts of climate initiatives do we have in the pipeline for the future? So I just wanted to outline these by action area, and I wanted to start with the renewable energy. So we are working in partnership with UConn. We just were awarded a DOE RACER grant, and it is for renewable energy. They will leverage our microgrid, and they would like to, it's for climate preparedness. So they would like to identify any vulnerability issues 1 to 3 days ahead of the outage. So we would have advanced planning. They would like to create a tool for outage preparedness, and then they will install a battery backup sensing technology so that we can reestablish our connection in a timely manner. And that's just for our microgrid there. To further progress resilience, we did submit a grant back in November. We would love to put a microgrid on City Hall, the library, and one other building for warming or cooling centers in the event that we did have an outage. So that would have a resilience measure there. And then our community partnership initiative grant, it sort of focuses on energy efficiency, bringing those measures to residents' homes. So you can think air sealing, insulation, assessing of mechanical equipment. That's all within that community partnership initiative grant. And that was submitted in March. And then we did relaunch our Solar for All initiative that did launch in March as well. And it's going on right now. So we're going to jump over to the landscape session on the right. We have been heavily focused on urban canopy. So we did speak with an organization about assessing the possibility of receiving some carbon credits for our canopy, like the existing canopy we have. And then we are in the process of submitting a IRA grant. This is the second one here on behalf of USDA for tree planting on private property in our most distressed neighborhoods. And that is due on June 1st. And then our urban canopy is in the process of receiving a reassessment. The last assessment was in 2010. The canopy action plan came in 2020, and we would like to revamp that so we could also incorporate some urban heat island sensing within our neighborhoods so we know the temperature differences and we can further target where to plant the trees. And then we have a community collaboration with UConn. They have received a grant to implement some green infrastructure. It's just a pilot, as we know, because we are unable to implement a lot. And it's just for community outreach and organization and making everyone aware of the benefits of green infrastructure. In the transportation section, we are assessing the feasibility of installing EV technology throughout the city. This year, we also did a phased approach in our clean fleet conversion. We did an inventory to see which vehicles would be converted first. And then also happening this year is our micromobility study, and that will just identify other methods of transit for those who don't drive or maybe prefer to just take a scooter or a car share or however they would like to access the city. So for waste, we are still, I visited West Hartford there. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've been in an elementary school, but it's quite enjoyable. And I just would like to see how their food separation in schools was actually operated. So we did explore that avenue, and we are trying to assess the feasibility of it in Hartford. And then a compost initiative, we're either looking at citywide, where the compost is picked up from our resident's house and then brought to a facility, or maybe just event specific. We do have Domingos coming up, and there might be waste from those events, food trucks, and everything else that could be separated and just recycled as well. I wanted to highlight some other partnerships. So this is outside of our 6 action areas there. We do have in partnership with DEEP, we did submit a grant to provide solutions for residents in the North End. It's for the flooding that they're experiencing. And it's kind of like the main points of this grant are to have two-way communication for the residents to document what they're experiencing in a centralized location, and just have them have resources so that they understand the plans MDC is trying to put in place and how that impacts them, so they can further advocate for themselves. So that was submitted in April, end of April. And then we're working with the Capital Region Council of Governments on a regional climate action plan focused on air pollution. The grant is $1 million, and it will be divided up between East Hartford, and Middletown. It was submitted, and we have been working together, all 3 of us in the MSA, to identify potential measures that we would like to see remediated and focused on, and that is ongoing. Outside of that, our certifications for our office are due this year. We have ACEEE, which is the Clean Energy Scorecard for the city. Currently, we are ranked 18 out of 100. And then for Sustainable CT, we are at the silver level, and the next level is gold. So I can't tell you where we'll end up, but we'll definitely still maintain or try and do better. And I think I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague from Health and Human Services at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of the public health perspective, the change in climate is responsible for the most recent storms and torrential rainfall that leads sometimes into flooding. And beside the economic impact of a flooding, I just want to add that sitting and standing water also lead into mosquito breeding in our catch basins, and that can cause mosquito-borne illness, as we know, the West Nile disease. And also urban heat island can happen here in city like ours when it's more it has to be with the people, and I mean the infrastructure, the buildings, and the dense pavement and roads. This can cause like high temperatures in the city and higher pollution, and it can also cause illness, respiratory illness, like difficulty breathing, exhaustion, and sometimes can cause stroke. And I just want to know that stroke is the 4th leading cause of death here in Hartford. Also, those extreme temperatures can be responsible of dangerous health in our most vulnerable population. This means like elderlies, children, pregnant women, and people with other respiratory illness. Saying so, these type of events can trigger to the activation of our cooling and heating centers here in the city. And I think that's going to be from my end. Please, next.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Just going to touch on a little bit some of our budget items that are being addressed this coming fiscal year, which include capital investments in our various resiliency measures. For flood control, we have 3.3 million slated as part of the proposed budget as part of a much larger multi-year plan. We have $250,000 allocated for providing the match for a drainage study that will be done of the North Branch of the Park River, specifically the whole area around Granby Street, the Blue Hills neighborhood, and then going into West Hartford and Bloomfield as well, the whole catchment area for the North Branch. We're doing that in collaboration with Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, as well as MDC. We have $300,000 set aside for new tree plantings and the removal of unhealthy trees and pruning and maintenance, things of that nature. Also, public safety complex commissioning. We have about $124,000 for an assessment of the different systems as to how we can make them more energy efficient and reduce our carbon footprint that way. And then on Weaver High School, we have a photovoltaic project of $160,000. That's the local share for the installation of solar panels. Health and Human Services, we actually have another $27,400 set aside for on-call emergency staffing, which would sort of be there in case, due to climate change and other conditions, we might have to activate the heating and cooling centers more often than we would have in the past. We'll have some more funds in that category. Next slide, please. So right now we're hearing a lot about droughts out in the western part of the United States, with the Colorado River drying up and other water bodies, the Great Salt Lake in Utah being heavily impacted. But our story is a little bit different in that, as a result of climate change, we've seen actually more of an increase in rainfall in our part of the country versus the lack of rain that they're having out west. So that's not just more rain each year, but the rain is coming in more frequently in intense storms with heavy downpours. We saw apparently, according to the EPA, more than 70% increase in the amount of rainfall measured during heavy rain events. We used to have, years ago, we'd have storms where you'd get a significant amount of rain, but spread over several days. Now we're getting that same amount of rain in a matter of hours, which really changes the stormwater dynamic for the entire region. Three major storms, of course, that everyone is familiar with from the summer of 2021. I guess prior to climate change, they would have been characterized as a 25-year storm, a 244-year storm, and a 31-year storm, although now with the changing weather dynamics, these numbers obviously are probably out of date, and we're seeing these storms much more frequently than at 4 times out of 1,000 years for that 244 storm. And of course, everyone is very familiar with the localized flooding we had in the North Main Street corridor, around Granby Street and Blue Hills, the Albany Avenue corridor, and parts of the West End. Next slide. So our stormwater and sanitary sewer systems are overwhelmingly a combined system that's owned and operated by the MDC. Despite this fact, in regards to the storms that we experienced in August of 2021, the city of Hartford deployed a $500,000 flood mitigation program to provide help to everyone who suffered damage, whether it be homeowners or businesses, and put out that money so that folks could remediate the damage that they experienced. It was about an average of about $10,000 per resident who was deemed eligible to receive the funds. There actually is a tough situation at the state and federal level, in that there's not actually a whole lot of stormwater flooding water funding available for addressing stormwater flooding. We have a lot of money allocated towards the things like the Clean Water Act and other programs, but in addressing drainage in itself, they're a little few and far between. But we have several initiatives that are either proposed or in the process of being completed as part of our flood prevention initiatives. As I mentioned before, we have the joint study of the North Branch of the Park River with MDC and DEEP that we're undertaking. We're also working now with staff from the EPA about a green infrastructure demonstration project in the area of Granby Street near Westbourne Parkway, and looking at what the feasibility would be to increase drainage in the ground under existing streets to try to divert some of that stormwater away from the streets themselves and folks' lawns and ultimately their basements. Hopefully we can make some impact on that. So we are currently designing a green infrastructure project that we hope to get out the door very, very shortly. And we've also come up with a plan for a drainage basin up in the area of Theodore Napper Lane up behind North Main Street. So we're hoping that this it's about a $7 million project if we're able to find funding for it, that could help alleviate some of this historic flooding we saw on North Main Street during intense rainstorms. Next slide. MDC is also doing a number of initiatives in response to some of these recent conditions that we have, including not just the flooding, but sewer backflows into homes and basements. They've started working on accelerating their timetable for sewer separation work, particularly in North Hartford, the area of Westland, Durham, Woodstock, Windsor Avenue, Branford Street. All these streets could be completed as early as sometime between 2024, 2025. And then the Granby Street area would be a little bit further along later this decade. They're also undertaking a lot of rehabilitation of sewer laterals. Laterals are the pipes that take the sewage from your house and bring it to the main in the street. And historically, when these pipes get old and deteriorate or get damaged in some way, the cost is on the split between the property owner and the MDC. But MDC, as part of their new initiatives, proposing to offer to pay for all of these necessary repairs. So obviously, this is going to result in more money being expended by them. They are looking to the state, particularly DEEP, to help fund all of these initiatives that they are working on. Next slide. The other system we have in place that is critical for given our climate change that we're experiencing is the levee system that we have protecting the city primarily from the Connecticut River flooding, but also to a certain degree the Park River. It used to be pretty common for the Connecticut River to overflow its banks and cause flooding in Hartford until 1936 and 1938. We had two hurricanes that impacted the region and left downtown under several feet of water, caused tremendous damage. And after that 1936 and 1938 hurricanes, the Army Corps of Engineers came in and worked with the city to complete the river levee system, which was a very large undertaking. That system is now approaching 90 years old. Parts of it are about 90 years old now. So we've been working with the Army Corps on a program called SWIFT, which is System-Wide Improvement Framework. It's essentially a menu of projects that we as the city have to undertake that we can apply for funding for at various levels in order to keep the levee system certified by the Army Corps of Engineers, which is critical that we have the federal government stamp of approval that our levee system is up to the task of preventing riverine flooding from impacting the residents of Hartford. So we have a list of projects here that we're working on over the coming fiscal years, the next 3 or 4 fiscal years that are in our short-term pipeline. And we're also seeking a grant for about $900,000 from the federal government that would help seal the Amtrak railway passage that goes through the levee system in the event of a flood, and would provide an additional barrier for flood water to get into the city. So those are some of the critical levee system related projects that we have in the works. Next slide. All right, so I think I'll turn it back to you, Cecilia.
Thank you. We'll take some questions at this time.
Cecilia, you want to take the
Oh,
presentation?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Councilman Gale.
Sure, thank you. First, let me thank the whole team. That was a remarkable presentation. I can't tell you how impressed I am with the scope of all the initiatives that the city has going on. So, kudos to you. In terms of where we rate, it sounds like we should be, rising up in the ranks, I would hope. But maybe others are doing great work too. But thank you for all of that. I have two questions and then three comments. Cecilia, you mentioned something about trees. In the presentation where you're talking about trees, you mentioned a $50 million grant over 5 years, but I didn't quite understand what part of that does the city get?
So we're in the process right now of working with the grant writer to write that grant, myself and the tree commission. So when it comes to budget, and I might be thinking I'm going for the gusto here, but I'm hoping that we can fill out that budget. And the maximum we would get is $15 million, and it would be over 5 years. So right now we're looking on, there's two facets. So it's expanding the tree canopy onto private property and doing some special projects on public property, including silver cells and some tree pits for public property. For private property, we really want to focus on our really distressed neighborhoods and those who can't afford to maintain the trees. We would love to do tree removal, we would do tree planting, stump management. There's a whole gamut that we just want to throw everything include everything in this plan and submit it. There's also an outreach and education component. There's a workforce development component, and then there's a curriculum component that we would love to partner with either MLK or there's another school that was identified to facilitate some curriculum in the schools and scale it from there.
Well, good luck with that. That sounds like that would dramatically increase our budget for tree planting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will take all the luck you can give.
Yeah, good luck with that. On the subject of organics, it strikes me, I thought there was something that went on in the legislature where they were setting aside a certain amount of money for some pilot projects in various towns around the state for recycling of organics. Is that something that's available to us to apply for, or is that money gone, or am I mistaken about it completely?
So I know what you're talking about. Last year, this office did apply for the Sustainable Materials Management Grant, and we were not considered. So it's something that we are pursuing in an ongoing fashion, and it's not in the back of our mind at all. It's still out there. Any grant opportunities that we find that are applicable that can be applied in Hartford, we will pursue.
Well, good luck with that. My three comments are, you mentioned the single-use plastics and the banning of that, and pre-COVID, that ban was going great guns, and everywhere I went, I had to bring my own bag, and I was happy to do so. Mm-hmm. Post-COVID, though, I think people have gotten lax. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I can tell you, at least two of the lunch places I go to now are very happy to give me plastic bags again. So I'm thinking that the city probably needs to do a little informational distribution, reminding everybody that there is a ban, and perhaps doing a little enforcement. On the solar array, and I know I mentioned this to Director Looney in the past, I see these solar arrays being used as canopies over parking lots. And so I just throw that out again as something to look at in the future. God knows we've got tons of asphalt in this city. And it soaks up a heck of a lot of sun, especially during the summertime. And I would just note, to the extent that this is useful information, there is a very small community organization called the Whitman Close Association. These are the people that live on Capitol Avenue in the first block from Main Street to Whitman Court. And they have a small parking lot. I think it's maybe 24 spaces. They're in the process, if I'm not mistaken, of putting solar canopies on all 24 of those parking spaces. And it's taken them a very long time to go through the Historic Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission to get everybody on board. But I think that will present the entire city with a model for how to do this. So something you may want to just keep in the back of your mind. And the last thing is the EV charging stations. Can't get enough of them, can't get them quick enough. You know, something that I think the city definitely needs to look at, and probably, I don't know how we could incentivize this, but it certainly strikes me that just about every office building that has any kind of a parking lot could install an EV charging station, and they can all make money on it. You know, because people are now paying for it. And I don't believe it's terribly expensive, because you're just pulling a 220 line out from your basement. And I have some particular knowledge about it because I'm going through it. I bought an EV, and so I'm getting much hipper to the whole thing. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you very much again for the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Surgeon, do you have any comments? You're on. Pardon me?
Nope, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the comments from Councilman Gale, and also to the wonderful presentation by Director Drayton and also to Director Looney. This is this resolution here is just a matter of really supporting what the administration is doing and help them to really identify the needs and cost that the city can actually undertake to make our city more climate friendly, with respect to what Director Looney had been pointing out as to some of these 40 to 100 year storms that we have been facing. And I've been in conversation with a group I'm a part of, which is the Climate Accountability, Leaders for Climate Accountability, which I have a partner of mine on named Lauren O'Brien, who works with municipalities across the country, as well as more so state elected officials. I'm one of the few local elected officials that are part of this group that are actually helping municipalities to identify ways of streamlining processes, just make the infrastructure cost and project related costs available to the public, but also to working with municipalities to find ways to take on budget friendly projects at a cost that could cost millions of dollars, but at a really reduced cost. So this really, again, this resolution helps to support what our administration has been doing.
Thank you, Majority Leader Clark. I was, before we go on, I was remiss that I did not introduce everybody. So I know we started with Cecilia Drayton, Director of the Office of Sustainability. We have Paul Drummy, who is the Director of Capital Projects and Operation. Jessica Forquet, epidemiologist. Did I say that correctly? Forquet. Forquet. Okay, Director Mike Looney, Acting Director Carmen Chaparro, Health and Human Services, Director of Budget and Management Julian Freund, Director Christina Baldwin, new to Corp Counsel's office, Attorney Danielle Combs, Corp Counsel Jim Delvisco, Charmaine Craig, who works with me in my office, and Lauren O'Brien, who I'm not sure, Lauren, where are you from?
Hi there. Pardon me. I'm with the Leaders for Climate Accountability. network across the country, paying attention to the costs of climate change to constituents and municipalities in the area.
Thank you. And Alicia Jenkins, I feel like I know where you're from, but I don't want to say it. So could you say where you're from?
Hi, my name is Alicia Jenkins. I'm with Sierra Club Connecticut.
Sierra Club.
I'm
Yep.
campaign organizer. Campaign organizer based in
Yes.
Hartford.
Yes, Alicia, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So we heard from everyone. I don't think there's anyone else. And again, Cecilia, that was fantastic presentation. The others who added to it, really a lot of things that are easily done that we don't think about and things that are more difficult. And, go trees. But so thank you very much. So do we have a motion to send this resolution back favorable to City Council?
Sure, be happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Motion passes.
One thing, could we
Yes.
ask Ms. Drayton to make sure that presentation gets sent around so we all get that copy of it?
That'd be great. All right, there was a motion and a second. Everybody voted affirmatively. That passes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for that presentation. That brings us to item 2.2, Mayor Bronin with accompanying resolution authorizing the city to enter into a revised agreement with the MDC to facilitate the construction of a futsal court at Columbus Park, 680 Franklin Avenue. Who here is to speak to that? Is that you, Director Looney?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll speak to it.
Okay.
Thank you again. We're here with a resolution that would authorize the city to enter into a revised version of an MOU that we instituted with them back in 2017. As part of that, this was applicable to the property towards the front of the Metzner Center at Columbus Park, technically 680 Franklin Avenue. This previously had been an area with tennis courts in it. As part of MDC's South Tunnel project, a large project that they've been working on from the Connecticut River across the southern end of the city, this area was being used by them kind of as a laydown area and as an access point for that project. And since we had lost the use of and our residents have lost the use of the tennis courts, it was worked out in an agreement that once MDC was done with their work, that they would replace the surface that they had disrupted with a couple of basketball courts. Since that time, in 2017, we've heard a lot of feedback from various community members and also members of the state legislative delegation who are more interested and feel it would be more appropriate to have a futsal court there. We do already have basketball courts at Columbus Park, so a futsal court would be a new asset that we don't currently have down there. And MDC, we've discussed this with MDC; they're on board. I have no issue with building a futsal court instead of basketball courts. This, of course, will be done at no cost to the city. It'll be undertaken by the MDC using a contractor that I believe they would select. And so we are just simply looking for council's approval to work on that MOU, revise it, and then enter into that agreement so we can get this new court built.
Thank you, Director Looney. Are there any questions of Director Looney about the resolution and futsal courts? Councilman Surgeon, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. What is a futsal court?
Futsal court is basically, the best way to describe it is a smaller version of a soccer field, except it's on a hard surface, not a grass surface. And so futsal is a modified version of soccer.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Gale.
Not a particular question, but just a comment. I also serve on the MDC as a commissioner, and if I'm not mistaken, in agreeing to provide this futsal court, the MDC has agreed to spend $25,000 more than was originally planned to create this amenity down in Columbus Park.
Well, isn't that, Director Looney, because this was agreed on in 2017?
I would suspect that cost escalation would be a factor, yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, and I just happened to read it today. I was like, wow, that's a long time to get here.
I know. Just have one more question. So is the NRZ in
Yes.
support of this, through you, Madam Chair?
From what I understand, they are.
Okay.
I don't know, Director Looney, if you have anything more to add to that.
No, to the best of my knowledge, there's been no negative feedback at the local level.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. If there aren't any other comments, do I have a motion to send this back favorable to City Council?
So move.
Second? Is there a second?
Second. Yep,
Second.
second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
abstained? Motion passes. That brings us to agenda item 2.3, Mayor Bronin with a company resolution authorizing a revived 2023 fee rate card for the use of Trinity Health Stadium, formerly known as Dillon Stadium. Again, who will be speaking to this? Director Looney?
That would be me.
That would be you. You are the man of the hour.
Okay, again, thank you for having us here tonight. We're here with a resolution that would authorize the updating of the fee rate card for Dillon Stadium, now Trinity Health Stadium, for the 2023 year. The original fee rate card for the stadium came about in 2019, and that was obviously before the stadium was up and operating, and we had actual facility cost data, and Hartford Athletic and their vendors had actual real-time data into what the real cost of holding different events of different sizes was going to be. So the 2019 card has really reflected the best approximation of likely costs that could be incurred that folks were able to come up with at that point in time. And obviously things have changed over the last 4 years in a number of different ways with the pandemic, inflation, things of that nature. So we're looking to come in with a card that we've spent time kind of going over the numbers with Hartford Athletic and their stadium management company, EDS, to kind of understand costs associated with things like traffic control, emergency services, parking management, utility costs, general operational expenses. So we've taken all of that information after a considerable amount of internal discussion and come up with a revised rate card that we think better reflects what the actual costs are for events held at Trinity Health Stadium. We've actually, it's not been substantial changes. It really has been in the area of some modifications to the base rental fee and also for special events. We're actually finding that back in the 2019 card that some of the fees that were established for community use or community special events were actually higher than what we were actually seeing in real data in terms of events of these different attendance sizes. So we've sort of adjusted that down. I think we'll actually make things somewhat more affordable for folks. And of course, we have in place the Community Use Fund, courtesy of Hartford Athletic and through the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, that has every year gets $25,000 placed in it by Hartford Athletic to help offset the costs associated with what would normally be charged on this rate card were to apply to another facility that didn't have access to such a fund. So some pretty straightforward changes in the resolution that you have there, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
My colleagues have questions. Councilman Gale.
Whoops. No, I don't have any particular questions. I was just looking to look at the rate card. I guess it's attached to the.
Yeah. So Councilman Gale, on that point, Director Looney, the rate card, I'm kind of confused by the rate card because under 250 and 250 to 499 is the same amount.
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, anything under 500 people is going to be similar. I mean, could we
Okay.
get the one difference is that if you are under 250 people in attendance,
Yeah.
it doesn't count as a special event.
So what does that mean?
So what that means is it doesn't also have to go through the special event process, because if you're only going to have 100 people, it's reasonable to assume that the impacts are going to be negligible on any sort of costs that would be incurred by the city. Once you get over 250, if it's a non-athletic event, it would have to go through our special events approval process. So that's why, even though they're the same cost,
Yeah.
that's why we split them that way.
Is there community involvement though? I mean, I'm trying to think, first of all, if I look at this just quickly, even if you did the 250 to 499, it costs quite a bit of money to have an event there, correct?
I mean, the fee can be somewhat significant, especially for organizations with limited means, and that is exactly why we have the community use fund.
Okay, and then how many events have we had over I know it's hard to really quantify that with COVID, but say last year, were there community events there last year?
There were, and I can get you an exact number and a list of those events. Not as many as I wanted, and that's something we're working on this year with Hartford Athletic and EDS, as well as coordinating with the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. And Christina Baldwin and I have also been talking about how we can create more visibility for the stadium, that it's here, it's available as an asset. Don't let cost be a driving factor in whether you decide to have an event here, because we do have the community use fund, and we can underwrite a significant portion of what the fee card tells you that you would normally have to pay.
And I don't want to get in trouble for this, so I probably shouldn't say it on public access, right? But could we not, just a personal thing, could we not depend on Hartford Athletic for the people to help us make the community involved? But I think Charmaine Craig has her hand up. Charmaine? No? Okay, I'm wrong. Sorry. Is there, do you happen to know, Director Looney, is there a reggae rock festival planned for July?
I would have to go back and look at the latest list that came out of events.
Okay.
I saw that, through you, Madam Chair, I did see an advertisement for that. I think it's the Hartford Athletics who's doing it.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just leave it with Councilman Gale. I don't know. I could stress that I think we could work better or harder or more in some way to get community to know they can use it, how they can use it, that there is a fund to defray costs, because I do think that's certainly the pandemic didn't help it, but I don't think that's really common knowledge. Councilman Gale?
Yeah, along those same lines, Director Looney offered to send us a list of the events that have occurred. Could you also give us an accounting of the community use fund, where it started and how much got used each year?
Yeah, if it's the same people using it, because people need to know about it. Maybe it could make a more robust community. So,
I to be honest with you, Madam Chair, I didn't even know the community could use the stadium.
there we go, right here. See, right here.
Because there's several
people. Negotiated part of the original deal was community use of the stadium, but you're right, it's not been continuously publicized since we entered into the contract with Hartford Athletics. It's also, the stadium's also there to be used by the local schools as well.
And I don't know how
they're supposed to have access to it, and I don't know to what extent that's actually taken place. I do think some of the schools have used it for soccer games. It was supposed to get restriped for football at some point late in the season, because I know Hartford High and Weaver are supposed to be able to use it for Thanksgiving Day game.
So what I think I'm hearing here, and again, this is kind of off topic, is we probably need to really figure out a way to better, get the word out about Dylan, the fund, and access to it. But that's kind of aside from this. So if there are no other
I do have
comments.
just one more
Yeah,
question
go
for
ahead,
you, Madam
Councilman
Chair.
Sargent. Yeah.
So how would, if a community group wants to use it, who would they go to? That's number one. And number two, how much of the cost is offset through this community fund?
Through you, Madam Chair, in order to make a reservation for the stadium, the public would go through the MyRec system, same as you would for any other field or athletic facility, recreational facility in the city. Once that comes in, my staff see it and communicate with Hartford Athletic and EDS, and then all parties kind of get together and talk to the person or the organization that's looking to do the event to find out more of exactly what they're expecting in attendance, what they need in terms of if it's in a non-athletic event. Do they need tables? Do they need chairs? Are they going to need to use the sound system? Are they going to be using the scoreboard? And will they need the lights? And all that sort of gets worked out between the city, the organization looking to reserve the field, and then Hartford Athletic and EDS. If it becomes a special event, then we loop in Kyla Hudson over at DDS for the special events process.
And at that joint meeting, is that when the cost is decided and how much is deferred?
Yes, that's generally. I mean, we do not have a hard and fast rule of you only get so much. You only get this percentage to be applied. And again, I will, as Councilman Gale had requested, we'll get the accounting over to you guys for the community use fund. But we can use, we have a very good balance in there right now. And so a substantial portion, 50, 75% of the cost of preserving the facility could be offset by the community use fund.
And so one through you, Madam Chair. So on the attached fee rate card, you said in your presentation that this is actual because they've had a last couple of years of activity. So this gave you a better understanding of the rates to charge. Is the rates is increased or decreased in the from the original agreement?
Well, the original rate card from 2019, particularly for special events, it was just one lump sum. So let's say you had an event that was between 200 and 1,000 people in attendance. The lump sum was $2,500. What we've done now is not really done it as a lump sum, but sort of split out all the things like security, police, fire, other services. We still have pretty standard rates for the PA system, the video board, the stadium lights, but we haven't gone with a lump sum because we think, from what we were seeing, the lump sum was a little too high. And when you actually broke it down into all its components, it wasn't as expensive as that fee kind of justified. So now with it broken down into different segments, instead of all being one lump sum, you can really get closer to paying what the actual cost is to operate the stadium.
And what does it mean, through you, Madam Chair, to be quoted by EDS?
Through you, Madam Chair, EDS is the stadium manager for Hartford Athletic. They reach out to police, fire, the other services, and get quotes for how many traffic officers might be needed, whether the fire marshal has to be there or there has to be any sort of additional emergency health services or anything like that. So it's on them as stadium manager to do the legwork to get those numbers for folks.
And how long is this new agreement going to be? It says that every 10 years it's reviewed, every 5 years. What's the length of time onto the next review of the rate?
Through you, Madam Chair, there really is no set standard for when we have to review the rate card. We just felt after coming through the pandemic, getting off the ground, that it was time to take a look at this again and make sure that the right costs were being applied and the right fees were being charged to the community.
And the only reason I asked for the time frame, because I mean, 5 years from now, anything can change.
Mhm.
And who brought it, maybe a lot of the historical information isn't around. Who would know when to actually, it's time to review this again? And that's one of the reasons why I'm asking, why is there no time frame associated for the next review?
I mean, we can certainly review it on an annual basis. If things haven't changed very much, you probably would, leave the rate card as is. But there are other fees that we charge at DPW that, again, are similar in nature in that they don't have a set time as to how often they're being reviewed. They just get reviewed really as part of the annual budget process for our departments. To look at what the revenues have been and what versus the costs. So in a roundabout way, I would say that we kind of do review it every year based upon what we're seeing in terms of my rec fees coming in and things like that.
Okay, so basically, so you could say it's an annual,
Yeah,
every
that would
time.
be reasonable.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Gale, you're all set?
All set.
Okay, so if there aren't any other comments, questions, we have, where was I? What were you on? 2.3. Do I have a favorable motion to send back agenda item 2.3?
So move.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion passes. That brings us to agenda item 2.4, which is Councilman LeBron, Council President Rosado, Councilman Hernandez, resolution calling on DPW for data on potholes and road repair in Hartford. And there is none of the originators of the resolution, but I do feel that Director Looney might be the person who's going to speak to this. I call me crazy, but could be you.
Yes, Madam Chair, looks like it's me. So again, thank you for having us here this evening. This resolution, as you mentioned, came forth from Councilman Nick LeBron regarding taking a look at what data we have in terms of pavement patching, which is it's been a significant issue for us in terms of all the utility work that's being done around the city. And obviously, we're all pretty experienced drivers of the city and have seen patches that are really excellent work, and then others that essentially turned into potholes, and which, when those are brought to our attention, whether it's by our own staff or by members of the public, we end up having to pull the original permit for the work in our permit office, track down who the contractor was and which utility they were working for, and then demand that they come out and repair the patch and make it right. Now, sometimes they'll come out multiple times, but with the volume of utility work that we have going on in the city, it is challenging to try to keep track of all that data and stay on top of it with inspections and things like that. So I believe Councilman LeBron, I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he had come across some interface tools, community interface tools, or computer programs that could be used to track this data, and would be something that we could look into getting, so that we could have a pretty good idea of exactly what's going on, which contractors have been good, which contractors have not been good, which utilities have been responsive, which utilities have not been responsive. Right now, a lot of that data we have in paper form, but it would be good to centralize it into some sort of data program that we could then run reports and be able to solicit quickly when we need to find out who's behind which patch and who needs to get back out and do it. Now, right now, as it is, our drivers will report in utility patches that are failing, and then our staff does the legwork of getting somebody from the utility company and their contractor out there to repair it. So going forward, we'd like to be able to have a more formal tracking system of all that information so that we could identify who's good and who's not, and if tools are available to us from a legal standpoint, be able to pursue different means of being held accountable for work that's poor quality.
Do my colleagues have any comments, questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Gale.
Director Looney, I guess I'm not quite understanding. Are you indicating that there potentially is software or systems out there that the city could adopt that might give you a more efficient way of tracking these things?
Through you, Madam Chair, that was my understanding that Councilman LeBron had come across a couple of those programs and was interested in them, as was I.
And have you, at this point in time, looked into any of these, or you're just now aware of them and you're going to look into them?
We're just really getting off the ground right now and pursuing those.
So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, whether this may be a resolution we just keep in committee and invite Director Looney back next month or 2 months from now and find out where we are with it, whether these things look like something that'll be worthwhile, not worthwhile, et cetera.
No, I along those lines, I had some notes also, and I was wondering, if this was something that was imminent. I mean, it couldn't be imminent because we don't have any of this yet. So what would be the resolution to this resolution? So, am I hearing that you would be making a motion to say that, or would we just keep it in committee? Or will we formally ask him back and ask Director Looney back in 2 months?
So,
4 months.
I don't know what Councilwoman Surgeon's thoughts are.
Councilman Surgeon?
What I would love to hear is Director Looney coming up with some sort of cost fee or the best software program out there, and we are still in the budget process. And try to get some funds to get this done, because that's some of the concerns, is not knowing where the potholes are, and people not even knowing when the utilities are cutting up part of the streets. Nobody knows until you leave your home and you see them doing the work outside. So I can agree with Councilman Gale, on postponing the item and just leave it in committee. But I would also like to ask Director Looney, before we finish the budget process, would he have any thoughts on any cost that may be associated with, and speaking to the IT department, maybe that's something we want to put into our budget process.
Through you, Madam Chair, I could certainly look into that and see if I can get something during our budget window here.
Okay, so then we'll just leave it in committee.
Yeah, I'll move to postpone it to the next.
I'll second the postponement.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to postpone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, abstain. I forgot the other word. That's terrible.
Opposed.
Thank you. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Opposed. Okay, so we have a motion passed to postpone. Thank you, Director Looney. So that brings us to 2.5 ordinance with Councilman John. Pardon me? Did someone talk?
Oh, it's me. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Gale, Assistant Majority Leader Rossetti, Councilman Nick LeBron, Council President Mally Rosano, with accompanying ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 1, Section 26-1 of the Municipal Code of Hartford to create the Department of Parks and Recreation. There was a public hearing on Monday, April 17th. So because, and I know maybe we have a way that we present this, because this is an ordinance change, and obviously we don't presently have a Parks and Recreation Department, and some of us have been in conversation with not only Director Looney, but Director Baldwin. I feel like we would start with hearing from department heads and then having a discussion with my council colleagues. I don't know who wants to go first, Director Looney or Director Baldwin?
I can jump in and go first.
All right, thank you, Director Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can, what I'll do is I'll give sort of like a brief overview and recap of what's been done and sort of the conversations that we've had most recently and what our thoughts are at DFCYR on the ordinance proposal. So back in February, in response to this committee's requests that were outlined in a resolution that was set forth, both my Department of Family, Children, Youth, and Recreation, along with Director Looney's Department of Public Works, reached out and asked a third-party consultant who's a nationally renowned and recognized expert in the field, who has a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's in Parks and Recreation Administration, to do an assessment of our programming and provide a report to address the questions that were put forth in that resolution. So that resolution provided a thorough assessment of our programs, park spaces, and the structure of our departments in Hartford. We then shared this information with this committee. That consultant actually came and presented that report to this committee, and a few highlights of that report included the fact that Hartford is one of the few municipalities that offers programming free at no cost to residents. Hartford also offers the most core programming areas. Core programming is defined by the National Recreation and Parks Association in comparison to the other 10 largest cities in Connecticut. And Hartford also offers many more in comparison to programs across the country in general. In Connecticut, only 10% of the largest cities and towns have that, quote, traditional parks and recreation structure, as it is no longer considered to be a best practice model in our state, is what came forth as part of that report. And then finally, the report gave recommendations on how we can identify challenges that we have in Hartford and improve upon them within our current structure. And that is not predicated on having to dismantle our current department structures. So following that, my department conducted a full analysis of our programming and how we can better serve the needs of our entire community through offering expanded recreation days and hours at all of our facilities, including the reopening of a new facility, the Blue Hills Recreation Center. So in working with our finance office, we determined the cost for that new initiative, and that cost is included as part of the mayor's recommended budget. And it's restricted to those proposed expansions that we presented as part of that business case of our recreation centers. And so then we, the next step in that is that we were happy to present that business case to you during DFCYR's budget hearing on April 17th, just prior to that public hearing that happened on the ordinance. So then fast forward recently, following the proposed ordinance change that we're discussing today, I had the privilege to be able to meet with some of you earlier this week. I had requested to meet with Councilman Gale, Councilwoman Rossetti, and Councilman LeBron to discuss the proposed ordinance so that we as a department could better understand your expectations. As those conversations, as we had discussed, we had never had those conversations previously. So during that meeting, as my team and I shared with you all, we are also very adamant about improving our services and programs. We have been, speaking and talking about that for a long while, which is what prompted that business case that landed in the mayor's proposed budget. Taking into consideration all of our staffing efforts and how hard they work every day and how dedicated they are to the work. How could we best improve our services through expanded recreation days, hours, times, and programming? As we also shared with you during that meeting earlier this week, our Office of Performance Management conducted a 30-year historical analysis of recreation funding that showed a correlation between funding and staffing and program delivery and services. And so we were also happy to, listen and share with you our mutual ideas on how we could have explore opportunities to build upon our current recreation services. So following then that introduction of the proposed ordinance change, we have since worked very closely with our finance office to support sort of like an initial analysis on cost that it would take to make such a change, to sort of restructure, dismantle the two departments and to form a new one. And based on that analysis, as we shared with you earlier this week, as a baseline amount, it would cost at least $575,000 at a minimum in salaries and benefits to support the administration of a new department. And so that would include, a director, executive assistant, someone to handle finance and payroll and accounting, and then a front desk clerk to sort of manage your community engagement. We also, since that time, have met with Corporation Counsel earlier this week to discuss several legal concerns that would need to be addressed with such a large ordinance change. And I will leave it to our counsel on here if they want to add anything to that. And also additionally, we discovered and lifted up that there are significant labor implications that have not yet been discussed with human resources or with the city's labor unions prior to the ordinance being brought forth that we believe strongly would need to be considered. So I think, sort of in conclusion, I would say as the newly appointed director of DFCYR, my overall recommendation would be not to move forward with this ordinance change at this time. So as was included as part of the consultant's recommendation, a huge reorganization of the department like this could have far-reaching negative impacts if it's not done without all of the proper financial analysis, labor implications, legal assessments that we've discussed, and in my opinion, most importantly, without a wide-scale community engagement work, including honoring youth voice and involvement as part of the process, since a change like this would, impact our young people greatly. So therefore, I respectfully request of the committee the opportunity to be able to put forth our plan that we proposed as part of our proposed budget, the opportunity to put that plan into fruition while we can continue to work together with council members here and our other city departments to ensure that any significant changes in our department structures are done responsibly while taking into consideration all of the law and labor and financial implications. So that is, sort of the standpoint of a DFCYR, and, I hope the broad sort of history of how we got to where we are was clear in what I presented.
Thank you, Director Baldwin. I will now go to my council colleagues. Who would like to speak first?
Madam Chair, you had mentioned Director Looney. I don't know if he.
Oh, that's true.
If
I'm
he
sorry,
gonna-
Director Looney. I've heard from you so much, I forgot to hear from you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to second Director Baldwin's comments and state that I'm in support of her position as she's laid it out and what she's requested be done tonight. Growing up in New Haven, I have a certain perspective on Parks and Recreation. We always had a unified department of Parks and Rec, and yet recently I've learned that they have split off again as well, and I'm trying to look into exactly why that was the case. But it may be in keeping with some of what our consultant that Director Baldwin alluded to had discovered in terms of best practices. I think just over the short period of time in which Director Baldwin and some of our other city staff and our legal and fiscal budgetary sides of the government have done. The level of work that they've done has been very intense, and I think has uncovered a lot of things that maybe initially that I myself may not have been aware of or had thought of. And so I think moving forward with some prudence and taking into consideration all the things that Director Baldwin has said and all the work that our legal staff and our budget analysts have done over the past couple of weeks would be the best course of action at this point.
Thank you, Director Looney. Start with you, Councilman Gale.
Sure. Thank you both. And, we certainly appreciate all of the input. Couple of things that come out and came out from the report that Director Baldwin referred to. The report, while it noted that Hartford has tremendous variety of programs, provided us with no metrics in terms of who uses them, how often they were actually offered. And unfortunately, the empirical data that most of us sense is that while there may be a wide array of programs that you could put on a list, we really aren't reaching a heck of a lot of people with recreation. And in terms of the models that, before I get to that, the other thing that we had asked for originally in our resolution was an inventory of city assets, including, number of swimming pools, fields, playground areas, potential gymnasiums, etc. That really wasn't provided by that report. The report did give an inventory of playgrounds, but it didn't go into the great detail. And understood. It's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, when you look at the various models that this fellow looked at, and he provided 5 separate models. He indicated there was one model, not the model that the city's using, but another model that the standalone recreation department. And even the model that the city's using, it's very unclear that we're comparing apples to apples. And the reason I say that, and clearly this is, we've all said this many times, this is not to disparage anybody or to disparage any particular person. But the Hartford doesn't have a standalone recreation department. What that report talked about was that there are many cities and towns in Connecticut that don't have a unified parks and rec, but they do have a standalone recreation department, and we don't. We have a very tiny recreation department that's been stuck into it was placed into the Department of Families, Children, and Youth some 20 some odd years ago as a result of personality disputes within existing staff at that time. Hardly a way to formulate policy for Connecticut's capital city and for the youth and the residents of the city of Hartford. So I don't think it's really accurate to indicate that Hartford's model is similar to other people's model. I don't think it is. Other towns either have standalone recreation departments or recreation departments with community services departments where the community services are recreational services, not social services. What West Hartford calls it leisure services. I forget what Glastonbury calls it. They have various names for these things. Hearing what Director Baldwin says, we understand that creating a department is not a simple task of simply hiring a department head to now oversee folks that were previously overseen by others. But it does strike me that, currently if somebody has a recreation question, they call. Their phone call ultimately gets to the recreation department. This isn't going to change. Somebody has a parks question, their call, it ultimately gets to the parks department. That's not going to change. What it occurs to I believe, and I may not be speaking for everybody, but I think I'm speaking for others. It occurs to us that what we do need is a standalone department that focuses on recreation, that's the primary focus. And we're not in a position to create the actual structure of the department. We think that's going to evolve as the department gets recreated. And that probably the first step in doing that is bringing in a director who then has to decide how to best muster the forces that are there, how to use the existing bodies that are there and create, to Director Baldwin's comments, to create the appropriate chain of command within the department. And that person may end up using all existing parties. It's not clear. But I don't think any of us are blind to the fact that this, it may not be, it could be $575,000. The good news is there's money in the budget to do it. And frankly, we think that I think anyway, and I think I speak for others, that spending the money in getting a focused Department of Recreation ultimately is going to produce far more services for folks in Hartford. And just a last note, I know I'm speaking a lot here on this, but a last note, and Director Baldwin, I don't know to what extent you have a recreation background. It hasn't really become apparent that you've got a tremendous recreation background. Not that that's an absolute necessity, but part of the issue that I see in the budget presentation that you made is the emphasis is in building up the existing community centers with more programming. And I think that what council's been trying to say again and again and again is that you cannot have a recreation department in the city of Hartford that's focused on 2, 3, or 4 recreation centers. It has to be far more decentralized than that. It has to get down to the neighborhood level. So I personally don't think it's a great use of our money to simply throw more programming at the Arroyo Center or at Parker Memorial. So I would like to see somebody come in and present some other ideas for how to spend this money. And I'm hoping that ultimately the administration sees that this is appropriate, because I think this is what council wants. And council gets we get to pass these things from time to time. So enough said on my part. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman LeBron, you have your hand up.
Thank you. So what I want to talk about specifically is with recreation are the children and the youth, or the folks that recreation serves, are they better off? And I think that that's a hard question to try to get to, because time and time again, what the data that we receive is how many programs and how many children and or families enter the program. Conversely, in the same department, we have, an early childhood program that has so many data statistics. You've got demographics, how many young people are we serving, what schools are they entering, the age groups, their proficiency, and all of those things that are required, data requirements as a result. So we can clearly see from a data perspective, from the early childhood and the city's excellent approach to early childhood, the potential of really assessing how effective programs are. I think along with the delivery of service, or the fancy word of operationalization of services in the rec department, I think it goes beyond just programming and the centers. I think it goes even a further step and asking ourselves, is anyone better off as a result? I mean, right now we understand that at the rec departments and the importance of rec departments. I mean, we are a city that suffer from diabetes. I think it's the demographics, and someone fact check me. I think Puerto Rican community is the #1 diabetic high blood pressure in the world. Second is West Indian, and third is African American. So when you talk about the potential of recreation and impacting people's lives, it is exponential. And so, you know, how are we measuring kids, you know, their weight, their symptoms? You know, recreation reduces anxiety, depression. You know, all of these things are intertwined. You know, we could potentially reduce heart disease long term. So I would even go further to say is that it's not just about the delivery of the service, it's how we're measuring our effectiveness and how we're changing the shape of our future through our children.
Thank you, Councilman LeBron. Councilwoman Surgeon. You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I have listened to both sides of the equation of should we or should we not have the recreation department as it was 20+ years ago when I was a council staff and the recreation department was actually severed. And I think it went from Health and Human Services, from different departments to now, you know, DFCYR department. I am basically conflicted because 20+ years ago, I certainly disagreed with the council decision to bring recreation into another department and send the parks into public works. So here I am 20 years later, didn't have an opportunity to make that decision, as again, I was a council staff, and now I can actually, you know, have a vote and make that decision regarding that department. And I think this is where I'm conflicted, because one of the things I'm hearing both sides and been around for so many years within the city is that I believe over the last 20 years when the recreation department was entered into another department, I believe, as I've said to numerous of my council colleagues, that the city, the sort of revenue, not even revenue, the sort of monies that were put into the budget for the recreation and the services that were offered was now decentralized. You know, the recreation department basically did not get the funding over the last 20 or 30 years. You know, the monies were sent to different community groups. I was disappointed. I use an example. We had ARP funds that came in after the pandemic to actually bring the community to well-being again. And over $8 million was sent to decentralized to community groups. And nothing was given to the recreation department. So what I would have wanted to see over the next year or so is a actually in-depth study of how we decide to go ahead and do this. I think, again, as I said to most majority of my council colleagues, is that you know, the city is going through a transformational period in the next 6 months. We will have a, you know, new administration, new council. And I think we are making that decision. We have been elected over the last 4 years. And over the last 3 to 4 years, even though we have I've heard conversation regarding, you know, recreation department, you know, coming back together again, nothing was done. None of the council members, you know, put monies or even advocated during our budget period time to increase funds into the recreation department, because again, we as council member, you know, approve a budget. And so here we are, you know, going into a possibly new administration change, and we're making decisions that's going to affect another administration that's going to be coming in less than 6 months from now. So I would have liked to have seen this process wait when the should a new mayor, new council come in, and let them make the decision, and actually spend some time and do the research. I hear Director Baldwin talked about, the 575,000 costs for a new department. I still don't understand how the not even the recreation side, but the park side of it. The parks is not just field, the parks is all the parks, the forestry department. How is all that going to fit together? And I don't see that information being given to me. So I am definitely not in favor of this ordinance currently. Again, I would like to wait for until new administration comes in and have a better conversation, and not a better, but a more in-depth conversation on how, if the recreation department is actually put by itself again, is it going to be recreation? When I go to Bloomfield or West Hartford and the other suburban areas, yes, the department may not be called recreation, but it certainly isn't combined with the parks. It's a separate department just for recreation again. And when I look at a Bloomfield or Windsor, not even Windsor so much, but West Hartford, their leisure programs is a more family-oriented leisure program. It has recreation, but it also has, educational aspect of it. It has stuff to do with family. So I would like to wait and see again how we can possibly do a more in-depth get more information from me before I can really make a major decision like this in separating the recreation department currently from the DCYR department.
Thank you, Councilman Surgeon. Majority Leader Clark, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Would just like to, I don't want to repeat what all that has been said, but I think that wholeheartedly this committee should consider postponing this item until the new administration comes in for the next term. The mayor had allocated, I believe, an additional $1.2 million totally focused on recreation, expanding that to a recreation and family center model. And I think that we owe it to this new director and Director Looney with respect to what's going on in parks, but more so Director Baldwin to implement the new strategies and plans for the Recreation and Family Services Center, because we don't know all the information as to how this separation will affect the two departments, Families, Children, Youth, Recreation, and Department of Public Works. And I think that that needs to be thoroughly assessed and reviewed before this takes place. And again, I think Director Baldwin has stated that, there's going to be some ramifications within the unions that has not been discussed yet. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Majority Leader Clark. Corporation Counsel Del Visco.
Thank you. I just want to say, and this is with all due respect, that my department never reviewed or analyzed this ordinance. As I understand it from talking to the Corporation Counsel, this was never presented to my department before it was submitted, which is highly unusual. That's number one. That's number one. Number two, we have our concerns about what the ordinance says, in particular about what this new department would be able to do with Board of Education land, and that's in light of what the Connecticut General Statutes say about how the Board of Education has control and possession over those lands, and with certain areas that deal with what are clearly special events. So, we have a lot of concerns about this, and I just wanted to give you that input right now.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel. I just wanted to add a few things before we continue this conversation. And again, it's more in the thought of all good comments, for and against from department heads. But I also want to remind people, there's always going to be a new administration, and we are elected for 9 more months, and I don't think any job you stop working, 9 months before you're out the door. We could say we could wait on it forever. And also, again, I've said it many times, I'm going to say it again. It's not about anybody present. It's not about anybody. And, you know, I'd like to think that people know we're doing this because youth and adults and others for the last 3.5 years have asked us for this. Not everyone, you know, has been in the position or been in this room or been in the PrAC meetings month after month to hear the things that we've heard. So this wasn't done in a vacuum. This wasn't done without input from, you know, people utilizing or not utilizing recreation. I want people to be clear on that. This is not something that, you know, was done, you know, just, you know, for whatever. And like my colleague, Councilwoman Surgeon, I have been around long enough to remember both also. I've been around long enough to remember a lot about parks. So I want us to think about that part also. So Councilman Gale, I see your hand is raised. You're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just circle back to a couple of the comments that have been made. And I'll start with the last one from Corp Counsel Del Visco. Take note that 2 nights ago, Monday night, we passed an ordinance on tractor trailers. And that ordinance was written by council, and I don't remember any requirement that we submitted to Corp Counsel before, and I do remember that Corp Counsel weighed in and gave us certain comments with respect to that. I think that if Corp Counsel Del Vesco and the entire Corp Counsel office have comments on this ordinance, and they should have presented them, they should present them tonight. I'm not sure what you're waiting for. You're our legal arm. I'm not looking to do anything. I don't think any of us are looking to do anything that creates any issues legally for the city of Hartford. So I'm a little dismayed that, you know, instead of coming here with constructive comments, that, you know, if you want to pass an ordinance, you need to put this in it or that in it, you just come up with a blanket statement that says we have concerns. Well, let's hear the concerns. Because what I hear is a council that may pass this, and if there's concerns, let's get them straight, give them to us, and so we can change the language. Going back to the chair's comments about hearing from the community, yeah, I've been hearing from the community for decades on recreation since the department was torn asunder when rec programs started leaving all of the elementary schools. And it's not accurate to say that council hasn't attempted to do something. I've been on this council for now 8 years, and multiple times during budget season and during those 8 years, I and other members of council have supported additions to the recreation budget. And I think when we had the meeting with Director Baldwin on Monday, budget analyst Corey Mills was there, and he noted that council had several times added monies, and that's been an attempt to try to get a more robust recreation department. But, you know, there's an old saying about the definition of mental illness, and that's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. As I said earlier, I just don't think having recreation in a department that's sole focus isn't recreation is not going to get us the best product. Now, I want to also just take a moment to mention the structure of the ordinance to address Councilwoman Surgeon's question. She indicated she didn't, she didn't understand perhaps how this was set up. The ordinance is set forth in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 subdivisions. And the ordinance is very clear. It establishes the Department of Parks and Recreation. It sets out the duties and to Corp Counsel Delvescu's one concern he did raise about coordination with the Board of Education. It states that the department shall coordinate with the Board of Education. So they shall do so in cooperation and in conjunction with the Board of Education, which seems like a perfectly appropriate way to phrase such things. Board of Education has a tremendous number of assets that are potentially underutilized and could be used. But what this ordinance says is it takes two existing divisions. It does not create anything. It takes the existing Office of Recreation that is defined in our ordinances. That is not a term that has been made up. It is defined already in our ordinances. We have an Office of Recreation Services. We also have defined in our ordinances a division called the Parks Maintenance Division. And what this ordinance says is that the Office of Recreation Services and the Parks Maintenance Division are now under a new director in a new department called the Department of Parks and Recreation. And from a budgetary perspective, we are simply going to take the line items for those two departments. At least this would be the theory. We have our budget books. We have the budget, the 41-page line by line budget analysis. You can see the sum total budget and the bodies within the Office of Recreation Services, and you can see the sum total budget of the Parks Maintenance Division. So what the ordinance says is those two divisions now come together. Their two budgets come together, and indeed, in those budgets, there is presently more than the $575,000 that Director Baldwin mentioned. There is more than that amount of money available to fund the director, and if the director needs an administrative assistant or a grants writer, this would be wonderful things. Usually when you get a grants writer, it means you're bringing money in. So hopefully a grants writer would pay for themselves. But in any event, Madam Chair, I just wanted to set forth those. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought Director Baldwin had her hand up. She does have her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I didn't know if Attorney Delvesco wanted to say something before.
I do, but please go ahead, Christina. You go before me.
Okay.
I do want to say something.
Well, go ahead, Attorney.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Okay.
But I asked Director Baldwin first. So Director Baldwin, you go.
Jesus Christ!
Okay.
Charmaine, what's the matter?
Oh my God! Oh, I'm sorry.
What happened?
There is a skunk in my backyard. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Director. Oh my God. She scared the hell out of me.
Me too.
All right. Director Baldwin, you go, and then Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to just lift up a couple more points that were raised during this conversation. In terms of specific metrics, so the metrics that were referred to earlier, most of those are actually included as part of the budget book. So the team here, the department provides many metrics in that budget book. As Councilman LeBron stated, not just about the early learning, but about recreation and youth services as well. And there's also information in the budget book regarding the parks and the pools as well. So, I did want to lift that up. But again, as I've been stating in this work and talking, we do acknowledge that there are many areas that we do want to improve on. So that's why, this proposal came forth. And so I do want to, reiterate that we're not at all saying things are perfect at all, which is why we came up with the plan. And so I also wanted to mention that, to reiterate once again, that only 10%, according to the report, only 10% the municipalities that were looked at as part of this report in Connecticut have that traditional parks and recreation model. Because we are moving away from that as a state, because it is no longer a best practice. It is a facilities-centric model, and the model that we have here at DFCYR is a person-centric model. So it allows for us to serve holistically and completely the entire young person throughout the entire life continuum, actually, from birth all the way through adults with the wraparound family support. And that is very much in alignment with how the state has shifted over the last 25, 30 years, which is why Director Looney had mentioned that New Haven has now also moved away from that additional traditional parks and recreation model. I also wanted to reiterate once again that that 1.3 million additional funding, it's not just available funding, it's actually came with a very specific purpose. It came with a very detailed business plan that my team and I, along with our budget analyst, worked many, many hours on. We came up with that $1.3 million figure that would support the changes that we were proposing. So that money is actually restricted to the business case that we set forth, that the mayor put in his proposed budget. And once again, you know, I think that all we are asking for, I mean, you all confirmed me just a couple months ago, right? So all we're asking for is the opportunity to be able to work with you, to be able to work with our community, and most importantly, you know, to be able to have our youth and community voice be part of the process in how we will best present and best serve our community through our recreation services. And then the last sort of point that I wanted to make, Councilman Gale had mentioned our budget analyst, Corey Mills. Corey is actually here beside me, and I know that there were a few things that he wanted to mention as part of that analysis that we presented to you a couple of days ago. So I'd like to turn over the floor for him for a couple minutes, if that's all right with you, Madam Chair.
Yep, please.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I got that now. Christina just kindly reminded me that I am muted. I just wanted to point out that Councilman Gale mentioned that I was the budget analyst for Family, Children, Youth, and Recreation, which I am. I am also the budget analyst for Parks, for Public Works and Health and Human Services and Finance and Emergency Services and Technology. But in this capacity, I'm serving as the performance manager for the entire city of Hartford. And what I wanted to mention is that I did in fact mention that, yes, the city council has increased the recreation funding for the past 5 years. But that money increased from $1.1 million to $1.3 million. In the golden era of recreational funding, that amount was $3 million, and that had about 70 different programs attributed to it. And so this council has absolutely done their due diligence and provided more funding for recreation. However, that's about 26 different programs. And there's a very big difference between slowly putting in money from about 1.1 to 1.4 and not 1.1 to $3 million. And so I just wanted to point out that there is a lot of programming that can be done if this department was provided more funding. And similarly, I have been the budget analyst for Parks and just Public Works in general for the past 7 years. And one thing that I've heard Director Looney mention is that if they were given more staffing, they could probably accomplish a lot more in the terms of parks maintenance and the maintenance of forestry and the maintenance of other just green areas of the city. And so I just wanted to point that out, that the answer to this from a budget analyst standpoint and the Office of Performance Management, which resides in the Office of the COO, is that give these departments the chance and the resources, and they can do a lot. And that's sort of all I wanted to say on the subject. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Corey. Director Baldwin, are you done? And I'll move on to Corporation Counsel. Yep, okay. Corp
Thank
counsel.
you. Thank you. I just want to say that to respond to Councilman Gale, what he said earlier, the rules for the council, in particular 18 near the bottom, say that the office of the Corporation Counsel must be consulted when ordinances are presented or put on any agenda. That's number one. And number two, the section that talks about this new department taking over or working with or conducting these areas, and I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. When it talks about it doing that in cooperation in conjunction with the Board of Education, that's only pertaining to financial matters, but it doesn't get into the actual control and possession of these lands. And that's outlined in the state statutes, and that says that that is under the Board of Education.
And Corporation Counsel, as far as that go, we are well aware of that state statute. And our discussion as with Director Baldwin was collaboration. We understand that state statute completely. And to your point, certainly I understand what you're saying, but also aren't you our Corporation Counsel? Isn't this something that we should be doing together? I don't want to feel, could I finish, please? I don't want to feel like, you know, obviously this is a strong spirit on each side of this, but I'd like to think with our Corp Counsel, there's more of a neutral stance on how we get to where we need to go, understanding you would have some concerns. And I'm getting the feeling that there's more of a, this is how you can't do it. So let's figure out if you feel there was a concern on the process that maybe you could have gotten involved in the process, but how do we figure that process out? And now I've lost track of the other thing I was going to say. So I hear what you're saying, but I also feel like you're here to be our counsel, Councilman LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I just want to make that clearly. But I just never, from a legal standpoint, heard like is a legal standpoint concern, a legal standpoint. Like I've never heard that language in regards to legal advice in terms of being concerned. And the only concern is that it wasn't reviewed, A, and then B, at least in my committees, any item that comes before my Corporation Counsel folks have reviewed and give me discussion and are currently working on things. So I don't know. Are we supposed to submit it to you and say, please, or is there an expectation that this is the Corporation Counsel's responsibility to review all the agenda items and all the things as it pertains to the meetings? And then if there were concerns, instead of giving a legal opinion that there's concerns, that would have been done prior to this. I just don't understand, you know, in terms of the process, because I'm all about a process, but this just seems new to me. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman LeBron. Councilman Gale. You're on mute.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll put a motion on the floor. We could certainly have further conversation if people want it, but at this point, I'll move to send this back to council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
A second. Second.
All in favor? Discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you. I just have to finish up my conversation regarding how the process has worked. And I'm a new member of this committee, but I've attended this committee over the last several years. If there's an issue that I want to talk about at the committee level. And I know you said the committee or members have worked with the PrAC Commission committee. It's an advisory committee, to the city of Hartford regarding parks and recreation. And when I said I did not understand how this program is set up, taking the parks and the maintenance, out of public works, I still believe that there's more discussion that needs to be made. And again, I cannot support this ordinance, but let's continue voting.
Thank you, Councilwoman Surgeon. So there is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
No, okay, I'm gonna make
Oh,
sure the
no.
record says that Shirley, Councilman Surgeon.
Councilwoman Surgeon opposes, but
Absolutely.
motion still passes.
That's all.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, just a quick point
Yep.
for you.
Yes, Councilman Gale.
I hear Councilwoman Surgeon indicating that she's a member of this committee. You don't show that on the agenda.
I know it didn't show on the agenda. I wrote to Charmaine about that. I'm sorry. She was
Okay.
just voted in at the last council meeting.
Got it.
They did a change. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Hi.
But I stated at the beginning that I believe I stated at the beginning that Councilwoman Surgeon was a voting member along with Councilman LeBron and Councilman Gale. Councilwoman Surgeon, didn't I state you were a voting member?
Yes, ma'am, I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
Thank
So
you.
we are now, okay, so now I lost track of where I was. Oh, yes, so Councilwoman Surgeon against 3-4. Motion passes back favorably to council. That would bring me to agenda item 3, which is a motion to adjourn, and I thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.